as I was saying, Joy Taylor, every dog has its day. And since I'm a big dog, I've got 2 days. Okay. So now.
You just called yourself a dog?
Yeah, I'm a dog. Yeah, I'm a big dog, a big one.
Kevin Durant is 6'11", who can pull up from 40. Okay. This brother is on that level. I'm talking about offensively.
Do you think you're better than Darrelle Revis is right now?
I'm better than you.
Welcome back to another episode of The Lowdown, ladies and gentlemen. It's your host, Mark Brown. As always, I have another special guest on the show. This past weekend was crazy. We go from the NFL draft, well, the virtual NFL draft, to The Last Dance, episodes 3 and 4 on ESPN. So there's still some sports content out there, and hopefully it gets better as time goes on. And I have another special guest on this show. He's no ordinary special guest. He is a Broncos analyst, a Denver Broncos analyst. He works for sports radio. He has multiple jobs. He's all over the place. He's a big name on Twitter, and his name is Benjamin Allbright. Benjamin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, anytime, Benjamin. I noticed that we had the Broncos had some key draft picks, especially in the early rounds. Within the first and second round, there was some big picks. And do you have any insight on what's going on from that?
Well, that had been their plan, kind of all along. We'd been talking about that on the show since December, that, people who wanted them to get an offensive tackle were about to be a little bit disappointed. They were looking to add a talent infusion to the offense, specifically speed, and at the skill position players. So, we put out there that we expected them to get 2 wide receivers in their top 100 picks, and come away with a center and a corner, and sure enough, they did that in their first 4 picks. So I guess you can't be more right than that. But it looks like they really, they've kind of looked around the division, looked around the league, and said, what do we need to do to compete? And that's add speed to the offense. They go out and get Jerry Jeudy, who's a great route runner and fast in his own right, but that was kind of overshadowed a little bit by the fact that he was a teammate of Henry Ruggs. And then, and then they had a KJ Hamler in the second round who runs the same 40 time as Henry Ruggs. They get a corner, they add a star center in Cushenberry, and they come back day 3 and they had Albert O at tight end, who, was the fastest tight end down there at the combine. So I think they've looked at the Chiefs and they said, well, we got a defense that can play ball. Now we need to find an offense that can score points, and they're certainly putting the ball in Drew Lock's hands and giving him the opportunity to do that this year.
Oh, most definitely. That's another thing I wanted to bring up, because Drew Lock, knowing that he took over during the second half of the season, shows really shorter than that. It was like within the last few games that he took over, because it was Joe Flacco until he got injured, and then Drew Lock definitely stepped up and definitely made a name for himself this past season. So knowing that now, you already mentioned Jerry Jeudy, you mentioned KJ out of Penn State, who's also a really fast guy like you just mentioned. And now there's some depth, because obviously Cortland Sutton made a name for himself in his first 2 seasons. And then now with the running backs, you got Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay now, and there's more depth besides that. And then Noah Fant gets had some depth with Albert O, like you mentioned, and he's a former teammate of Drew Lock, as a matter of fact. So the offense looks like they will be ready to go, especially in the AFC West, because you got a lot of offensive weapons. You got the juggernaut Kansas City Chiefs right now, the reigning Super Bowl champs. So Denver's going to need to compete with their division, and starting off was with these picks. So what do you see from that? Do you see Denver potentially competing with Kansas City in the next years to come, or as early as this year, or maybe shortly after that? Because these guys are just now coming in; they're rookies. So how do you feel about that? About them competing? I know this is an early prediction, but how do you feel about Denver competing with some of these juggernaut teams, especially in the AFC West?
Well, I think, you're going to have to wait for this thing to come together. You mentioned Cortland Sutton in there. We didn't even mention Noah Fant, who, came into his own second half of last season. I think this offense is going to be nothing if not exciting to watch. I mean, the slowest guy on offense runs a 4.69 40, and that's a quarterback. So, there's all kinds of speed out there. I think, I don't know that they're necessarily set to compete with Kansas City this season. I think you're going to have to wait for a little bit more of that to come together. But Drew Lock showed a lot of promise last year, and I think they could be a wild card team this year. I think they could be a playoff type team. I don't know if they're a division contender or a Super Bowl contender, but they could certainly be a playoff contender.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure. And then defensively, I mean, once Bradley Chubb is back in action, because we know that he suffered from injury this past year too, and Bradley Chubb being a big-time defensive tackle, and now Von Miller being the veteran on the team, and then getting some guys on defense. So that's another thing, adding depth to the defensive side, because knowing that Chris Harris Jr. is no longer with them, there's going to be a lot of voids to fill, shoes to fill, stuff like that. So how do you feel about the defensive side of things with these draft picks and some of these guys that are undrafted free agents? Who knows, they might be able to definitely surprise somebody during camp.
Yeah, I think the defense is going to be a lot better than people think. I mean, it was pretty good last year, even though they had a lot of injuries. You mentioned Bradley Chubb. He was obviously hurt early on and didn't play as much as they would have liked. Bryce Callahan, who they brought in free agency last year, never played it down, and he's going to be back and healthy this year. So I think that from the defensive side of the ball, they played pretty well last year. A lot of people didn't see it because the offense wasn't playing all that great, but they certainly played their hearts out on defense. And you add in some of these picks. I don't know if many of them can get much time to play. Ojemudia might take over that Will Parks role, but you got an All-Pro free safety in Justin Simmons. You got Kareem Jackson, who played really well at the strong safety. They added A.J. Bouye at corner to replace Chris Harris. You get Callahan back. Devontae Bosby played really well until he got hurt. He'll be back. And then they've got some developmental guys, Duke Dawson, Devontae Harris, and Isaac Yiadom, who they drafted a couple of years ago, in the mix there at the corners. On the linebacker position needs some help. Alexander Johnson was kind of a revelation last year coming out of nowhere, but the other inside linebacker, Todd Davis, isn't really athletic enough to be out there covering like he should. And then the defensive line, you've got Chubb and Von Miller at the edge positions. They got Mike Purcell at the nose, although with adding Jarrell Casey from the Titans, he may move over to the nose. You got Shelby Harris at the end, and then they've got draft pick Draymond Jones, who will be playing the other end. Last year out of Ohio State, that was kind of Vic Fangio's guy. So you add the pick of McTelvin Agee in there, and I think a defensive line. I think a defense is still the strength of the team as the offense tries to get it all together.
Yeah, exactly. And then when you mentioned Fangio, how do you feel about Fangio coming into this season? Because obviously, Broncos have several or multiple coach changes since the end of the Super Bowl, which is going on 5 seasons ago now, because that was during the 2015 season. So how do you feel about Fangio entering this season?
I like him. From the media side of the house, he's kind of a breath of fresh air. He gives good quotes at press conferences, tells you exactly what he means when he says it. He's not just dancing around it or giving you coach speak, that kind of thing. So that's kind of fun. From the players' side of the house, he's a little tough on him. He's an old school, tough love kind of coach. He can be a little arrogant at times, but I think most of the guys like him. There's some guys that don't really care for his communication style, but they respect him as a coach, and they go from there. So I think I think he's a great addition. Everybody else went young. The Broncos went old, and it seems to have worked out for him so far.
Oh, yeah, exactly, because Fangio, there's been a lot of slander throughout, coaching history here in Denver, especially within the past 4 seasons or so, because due to the, weak seasons they've had, shortly after the Super Bowl win. But now it just looks like they're starting to, catch up to everybody else. It seems like these draft picks will be extremely important to them and entering camp and stuff like that, and we have no idea how camp's going to look for any team right now due to coronavirus concerns. But I'm pretty sure, the NBA looks like they're starting to open up their practice facilities for some teams here and there, but there's no telling them when they're going to start. But the NFL, in my opinion, hasn't really been affected by this because football season doesn't start preseason doesn't start till August, and then the regular season is in around Labor Day weekend. So we still have plenty of time. I don't want to, jinx nothing. Don't want to get my hopes up too high, but I feel confident that NFL will happen. We're just trying to figure out how it's going to pan out because we already witnessed a virtual draft, which is completely different, never seen before. So maybe the NFL, maybe the NFL will be able to, somehow slide out of this and, on both hands instead of just one hand. But we'll see how that goes. But another question I wanted to ask is, what are some of the weakest spots in offensively and defensively do you see for the Broncos as of now before training camp starts?
Well, I guess that depends on your confidence in Garrett Bowles at left tackle. He's had a long history of holding and subpar play, but over the final 5 games of the season, allowed 0 sacks and only had 3 penalties, one of which was an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. So during the Drew Lock era, he looked a lot better. So I guess it depends on your confidence in him. If you are confident that those last 5 games are the real Garrett Bowles, then you're not saying that left tackle is a weakness. If you aren't, then you're saying tackle probably is. Right tackle, Juwan James played 30 snaps last year despite that contract. He's had a history of injury problems. That's got to be something that's definitely concerning. So I would say the tackle positions are a question mark at least. Over on the defensive side of the ball, inside linebacker, Alexander Johnson's pretty good, but the other inside linebackers are all athletically limited. And then depth at corner. Callahan's coming back off the injury. You're hoping he can stay healthy. Dawson's coming back off injury. You hope he can stay healthy because behind them, the depth is pretty thin. And honestly, A.J. Bouye is the only real proven, known commodity out of the corners. So I would say corner is something that could be a serious concern for the Broncos.
Oh, yeah, and then plus the corner is going to be extremely important, just like you said, because now, you're going to be competing against somebody like, the fastest guy in the NFL, Tyreek Hill at receiver. So you got to compete against somebody like him and some of these other top-tier receivers in the AFC West and just the entire NFL as a whole. So, yeah, you're right about that. That void is going to need to be filled. These names that you haven't really heard of, well, not you, but fans out there that never really heard of are going to definitely need to see these guys are going to have to step up. Definitely they're in camp. They're going to have to do everything they can to lock in, study film, make sure they improve because the season's going to be here before you know it. And that's just going to be a tough – the cornerback's extremely important nowadays due to, the high pass game, the high passing rate. So it's if you weren't to have any depth at corner and say these guys get, winded or injured, then, it's just – that's all heck is going to break loose because of what's going on because you just have to see what's going to happen. But do you believe that the Broncos will be able to have any possible trades between now and August in the cornerback position?
Trades, I don't think so. Maybe adding a body or two. You could see them. They've been in talks with Prince Amukamara. You could see them try to snag him on a veteran minimum kind of deal. There may be a body or two that they add, but I don't think they're going to be trading anybody. There's not anything out there that I'm aware of that they would be trading for. The only things that I'm aware of in terms of veterans that they're out there looking at would be the aforementioned Amukamara and then Kelvin Beachum at offensive tackle for depth. But I think they're done spending as far as that goes. I think they're going to roll in with this team. They just, they've got to make sure that corner position is nailed down because that depth there is perilously thin.
And I also forgot to mention this. I noticed that the Broncos acquired Jeff Driscoll that came out of Detroit this past season. So, he's now listed as the backup quarterback. And Driscoll had some games. He started a few games in Detroit due to, there was a lot of injury going on in Detroit this past season. He got a chance to start a couple of games or so. And how do you feel about him providing depth at the quarterback position?
How do I feel about who providing depth?
Jeff Driscoll, quarterback.
Oh, quarterback depth. Sorry, I think you said corner depth.
Oh, no, I said quarterback too fast. My bad.
No. You're all good. My hearing is terrible. If Jeff Driscoll starts, things are already bad for whatever reason. That either means Drew Lock got hurt or Drew Lock is stinking the joint up. So if Jeff Driscoll has to get in, things have already taken a turn for the bad. And if he happens to play well, then that would be unexpected. I just don't think that if you're the Broncos, I don't think that you are counting on a guy like Driscoll to come save you. Let's be honest here. Anybody that wasn't good enough to stay with the Detroit Lions and Cincinnati Bengals isn't going to be your savior.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll just have to wait and see. I didn't think he would be able to. Obviously he's not going to start because Drew Lock's there. But if he was coming off injury, then like you said, we'll just have to see how that goes. And we just got to hope that Drew Lock remains healthy because that's been a problem with Denver's team is that some key players would get hurt here and there. But it happens to everybody. That's football. So what are some ways you could think that not only the cornerback position, what are some ways guys can improve offensively besides the receiver position? Obviously, there's a lot of depth there, and there's a lot of depth at the running back position. So what are some other ways the Broncos can dominate offensively?
Well, I think it comes down to game planning and execution. I think that the new pieces that they've got give you the idea that you're going to roll out an offense that's going to get one-on-one coverage across the board. You can't clamp down on any one guy because then the other guys are going to burn you. And so I think that's kind of the plan here. The Pat Shurmur offense, as we know, it starts with the run game and builds off deep crossers on play action. He likes to run the screen game quite a bit, especially with the tight ends. I think it really just comes down to execution. I think it's getting the game plan, understanding the playbook, and understanding it philosophically, and then going out and executing it.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing I wanted to bring up was consistency because I noticed Denver's had a problem with that in recent years, especially this past season. It was consistency because Denver could have somehow made a wild card visit if they just won. There was a few games that they lost that they should have won. For example, they blew away a 21-point lead over Minnesota in week 11. Mm-hmm. And then there was games when they played Jacksonville in week 4, that should have been a win. And then another game struggling with Chicago. Yep, Chicago was another one. So just knock out those 3. If you added 3 wins to those right there, because they sure showed their true colors against Houston in week 14. That was nice. That was a crucial win for Denver. But those 3 losses that I mentioned right there, that's inconsistency. So if Denver were to be more consistent this season, who knows, like you said, it could be a wild card visit or anything like that. So, I mean, hopefully they're able to make up for that lost time they had this past season, and hopefully these draft picks are able to step up and add some more numbers to the plate.
Yeah, there was a stretch of 3 games there: the Chicago game, the Jacksonville game, and the Colts game, I believe, where they lost all 3 of them on last-second field goals, and then those kickers went out and whiffed last-second field goals the next weekend. So, it's just kind of one of those bad luck kind of things the Broncos had last year. They were better than the record. They weren't a great football team, but they were better than the record, and they still finished second in the division, which I think a lot of people didn't even realize. So, yeah, there's something to build on, and especially going 5-1 down the stretch here with Drew Lock, and that lone loss was in a blizzard against the Super Bowl champions. I mean, you really can't ask for a better end of the season than that. So if they can carry that momentum forward, I think I think they'll be in a good place.
Yeah, and then Cortland Sutton. There's been talk lately from a few analysts here and there that Cortland Sutton can make a visit to the Pro Bowl here and there. Do you think he can be a potential Pro Bowl receiver?
Cortland, heck, he might even be an All-Pro. I mean, he's a great receiver. He certainly surprised me with how well he's done. He came into the league more basketball player than football player. And one of the really cool things last year, we do this Monday night deal where we have a player out at Buffalo Wild Wings and get a chance to talk to him for an hour in front of the fans and all that. And Cortland came out and he blew me away. Dude is as you say, leader, wants to be a leader, driven, goal-oriented, smart. Absolutely blew me away as a person. And, from that moment on, I was a Cortland Sutton believer. And I tell you this, sky's the limit for the kid. He's a dominant athlete, but he's got it upstairs too.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good here because knowing they came out of SMU, I mean, the guy's from Brenham, Texas. So I've heard about him, while I was in high school. I mean, he was more in the lower tier type of recruit. And then he came in, definitely turned heads when he was at SMU. And the rest is history when he comes to Denver. Denver, he stepped up knowing that some of the key receivers left. And now he's the main go-to guy as of now. Because there's a lot of new guys because they already have. I mean, according to outlets.com or ourlads.com, they have Jerry Jeudy and KJ as they're rookies right now, but they have them projected to start alongside Cortland Sutton. So Cortland Sutton is going to have to be like you said. The fact I'm really glad he mentioned that because now he can be a great leader to these young guys coming in.
Right, and he's kind of the elder statesman, even though Tim Patrick, I guess, would be the oldest guy on the offense, not named Melvin Gordon. Cortland really is kind of the elder statesman. It's such a young offense. So, and he likes that leadership role. Matter of fact, there was a training camp of kind of fisticuffs between him and Emmanuel Sanders last year before Emmanuel was traded away because of that. Cortland didn't like that Sanders was loafing on a play, and Sanders, as a veteran, didn't think that the young guy should be calling him out. But Cortland did, and that's the kind of expectation that he sets. You're going to go every rep 100%. You're not going to take any reps off, and I think that translated and that resonated with some of the younger guys.
Yeah, and another thing I wanted to ask about when it comes to depth is like the running back position. I know I mentioned it a few times, but with Melvin Gordon added to the list, so how do you feel that 1-2 punch is going to go between the Tasmanian Devil and Melvin Gordon? Do you think that can be a potential run for it?
I think I think you're going to see a split that looks kind of similar to what to what we saw with the Texans back when Arian Foster and Steve Slayton were there. You see a kind of 60-40 split. You'll see Lindsey lose a little more in the pass game at times too, but I think both those guys can play well. I think the problem was the Broncos really haven't been able to convert on third down and short yardage situations, goal line situations, and they had drafted Royce Freeman to be that guy. And it just wasn't happening. So they went out, and Melvin Gordon was a free agent, and Melvin was number 2 in the NFL in those kind of situations. And they said, you know what, we're just going to go out, we're going to overpay the guy, and we're going to get him in here, and he'll be here for situational football, and we'll just ride the hot hand. So I think it spells trouble for Royce Freeman, but the other two should be fine.
Yeah, because they already had some comparisons with the Cleveland Browns of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, those two guys. So they're comparing them to Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay. So how do you feel about that?
As far as
like talent wise, because Nick Chubb right now is more talent. Like he's produced. He's had more yards. Well, Nick Chubb's had more yards. He rushed for more yards this past season than all these guys I mentioned. But I feel like Phillip Lindsay was coming off an injury, and then Melvin Gordon. He was trying to hold out there, and he started kind of late this past season. So to see Melvin Gordon come in, he's not really empty-handed or anything like that. So knowing that him and Phillip Lindsay can work together and then have some depth with Royce Freeman, like you said, I feel like they can potentially put up some numbers like greater than Nick Chubb. It depends how the Browns do offensively because they they didn't really struggle, but they struggled in some areas. And I'm not saying that Denver will struggle in those same areas because it's different coaching, a different team. But I feel like that can be a huge distraction to the defense because they're going to assume that, there could be a few plays where Melvin Gordon will have him line up and do a few real routes here and there, have him do some pass protection, have Phillip Lindsay also run routes. Because you can have two backs out at the same time. You can have Phillip Lindsay line up in the backfield while maybe Melvin Gordon line up and slide, just run like a quick route or something like that. So that can probably confuse a few defenses here and there.
Yeah, you could see some of that. And as far as the Browns, the comparison to talent, I think they might have a little more talent there, certainly young talent. But the Browns are going to be running some of the Browns are basically going to be running the offense the Broncos ran last year. That wide zone, Gary Kubiak variant offense that Stefanski's going to be running. It'll be interesting. It'll be a two-headed monster there. You'll see them, rotate backs and all that. As far as the Broncos go, you'll see some of that. They used Wayne Gallman a little bit in that role last year, I think, with Saquon Barkley. It's different when you had a Saquon because he was kind of the bell cow guy for the Giants, but Shermer's not no stranger to having multi running back attacks, and I think they'll leverage that.
Yeah, exactly. And then, do you have any last-minute thoughts you'd like to provide about the Denver Broncos before we end this?
Say that again. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was switching ears.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good. I was saying, do you have any last-minute thoughts you'd like to provide offensively or defensively about the Denver Broncos overall before we end the interview?
I think they're going to be better than people think. I think they're going to be a more competitive football team than people think. I think they were last year. The record didn't reflect it. I think they'll compete for a wild card, especially with these expanded playoffs they're doing. I would not be surprised to see them make the playoffs. I would be surprised to see them finish under 500. They may have a bit of a slow start with all the young guys, but you hope that would come together. I think Drew Lock's really going to make a name for himself. He's a lot better than people think he is. I think he's really going to make a name for himself this year. So it'd be interesting to see Denver as an offensive identity team, probably for the first time since Peyton Manning was out there blowing it up.
I agree with that because I was thinking that Drew Lock can actually make a name for himself similar to what Daniel Jones did with the New York Giants. And I feel like Drew Lock can potentially be better than what Daniel Jones did this past season. So we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, there's a lot of young QBs that are stepping up and, all over the league. So Drew Lock is going to be another name that could, like you said, become a household name throughout the entire NFL fan base. So, that's going to be a take that we'll definitely hold on to until the season starts. And I just wanted to, I know you're on a time crunch, so I just wanted to thank you, Benjamin, for getting on the show, man. It's a huge honor to have you on, and I appreciate it. I appreciate that I was able to speak to you.
Yeah, no problem, man. Anytime.